So we heard, I think, quite in detail from Signe a bit the rationale of what we are trying to do with the EIC. I will have later, after lunch, I would say a more detailed presentation of the opportunities when you will be able to ask, I would say, more technical questions on how to apply and what type of projects could actually be relevant for the application. But I think in order to see what is the reality in Latvia, maybe I can turn to the State Secretary, Mr. Iglitis, right now, to tell us after this general presentation about what the EIC pilot and the future EIC under Horizon Europe can offer. What's your reaction to it in terms of the reality here in Latvia of the national support schemes? Do you think this makes sense from your point of view? Do you think it is something that you can work with, you can benefit from, and you can orient your potential companies to apply successfully towards it? And if not, what can we do in order to make that a reality, please?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here and sharing this this idea in person to the community. The short answer would be absolutely yes. It does make sense. It does create traction. It does create synergies between what we are trying to do here locally and how we see the overall development. It's absolutely clear that without innovation, none of the countries alone and Europe as the more kind of federal creation cannot be competitive in the global arena for the longer time. So we need to address this, and we are happy to see that this initiative is ongoing and it's starting to take a practical shape. So this is really great to hear that there is a strong signal coming from the European Commission that a significant amount of funding is really being provided and that we are aiming for this world-class innovation being available also for the Latvian companies here. From the Latvian perspective, I want to say that we've been investing ourselves quite heavily. We've been creating the environment supporting for the innovation to grow. It's been legislative initiatives. We've been working on the startup law. We've been trying to stir together the startup ecosystem to activate it more. We've been providing in a range of actually close to 200 million already in the funding, and we are planning to provide 300 million more for SMEs and startup support initiatives. So from the funding perspective, we are active as a government here also. What I want to mention and what I like to see on your slides is this discussion about the ecosystems, because we clearly see that the example which started, in my eyes at least, if I look back, as the creation of the startup ecosystems, where we kind of focused on more on the ICT companies, being them kind of paired up with the venture capitalists early on, and then trying to add in some more industry interest and some more academia interest. That's been growing for, I'd say, approximately a decade now. But we see that it has to be brought to the next level of the complexity, where we need to marry in more of the other industries. And what we're trying here in Latvia is we are creating the environment from the legislative point of view, and also from a practical point of view. We are doing the workshops where we are identifying startups, academia players. We are bringing in the local champions, which are the biggest companies with some experience and some hunger for innovation, and which is very practical for Latvian scale of countries, is we are bringing in also the international players, because we realize that without their experience, we cannot grow fast enough. And without their presence, we cannot justify our ambition to become the part of the global value chains. So that's kind of our view at the ecosystem development, and we've been quite successful in creating the first three ones which we have identified, namely smart city, biomedicine, and smart materials, which are now the active work ongoing to promote the development of innovation through this kind of cooperation, collaborative action across these various players. And then we as the government, we're trying to be kind of in the middle, coordinator, initiator of the activity, and then push it forward. So seeing that European Commission has similar approach in mind, this we see very good synergy. So from our perspective, we see it as a potential to have the kind of open door for our ecosystems to scale up in European scale, to grow into these European ecosystems, and to achieve the ultimate goal to provide this innovation and technology to wider customer base. So couple of challenges still exist, of course. What we are seeing from our position is, so far, Latvian success in Horizon 2020 programs has been moderate. We've had success rate of just below 13%, which is low in my eyes. We would love to see the better traction with this European idea. And the funding, what we have acquired so far, it's been 47 million euros only, which compares pretty low to the other countries. So through this approach, through this EIC idea, we hope that also this engagement of Latvian companies would be more successful in the coming period. So yeah, just to name a couple of companies what we have had a great achievements with, and where we are seeing that this synergy of the ecosystems development through the EIC could bring even more value would be, for example, the Grow Glass. We have a company who has created world-class products based on the glass, and the acryl, where they are covering it with the specific anti-glare, anti-reflective coatings, and these kind of technologies used by the Louvre Museum, for example, to make the exposition better visible. But this kind of technology can be applied and developed in very many areas. For example, in the same biomedicine, we are seeing a synergy there. There have been the Anatomy Next actually is one of the great projects where we are seeing where there is augmented reality technology being produced, which we also see as a great potential to participate in the wider ecosystems. So I'm again thankful to see that these ideas are coming through, that this project, which has been incepted back in 2017, is now taking the practical shape, and I look forward for the Latvian companies to participate. And from the government support, we will be doing everything possible to make sure that not only Ministry of Economy, but also we're partnering with Ministry of Education and Science to provide the support to these companies participating as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this quite extensive presentation of the landscape today in Latvia and how the EIC could help also Latvian companies benefit from it. As you know, the EIC, from the presentation of Signe, is an attempt to bring public policy at European level and bridge the Valley of Death, the famous Valley of Death, between research and innovation and the possibility of growth of companies, but it's also trying to do that in an innovative way by bringing blended finance, which is not only traditional subsidies, but also bring the possibility of using financial instruments, so basically investment, and trying to bridge the world of, I would say, public support in form of subsidies and the world of investment, which until now at European level was done by the private sector, even if the private sector was supported indirectly. So turning to one actor of I would say the investment ecosystem here in Latvia, Mr. Zedekis, can you tell us how you see this initiative and how will it possibly impact positively or maybe not so positively the opportunities for investment in companies in Latvia?
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you, all the speakers. I think I personally learned a lot already from the presentations today, and I think that these opportunities should be marketed even more in Latvia, because, for example, in Latvian Business Angel Network or among accelerators, these are not yet fully explored, and maybe let's say not shared enough in the ecosystem and community. But let me introduce myself a little bit so you can understand my point of view. My name is Voldemārs Brediķis. Maybe for those who are familiar with Harry Potter stories, it will be easier to remember my name. I'm, as said on the slides, I'm founder of Linearis Translations, which is I would say, leading language component translation service provider in Baltic states already 16 years. And our aim with the technologies and startups is that we are now acting as early adopters for language startups. I'm also a member of the board and business angel myself of Latvian Business Angel Network, and we are putting a lot of effort in educating startups as well as educating private investors, business angels, about the trends, about the investing methodology, about cooperation with startups, because we see that sometimes the investments don't happen because we talk different languages and the expectations don't meet. So we need to educate ourselves as business angels as well on that. And this is the, let's say, target for 2020. Also, I'm a managing partner and co-founder of Commercialization Reactor Fund, where we work with, which is one of the 3 acceleration funds in Latvia. We work exactly with deep tech startups, and we understand that behind the tech there should be serious science. This is accelerator also founded by EU through national financing agency Altum, which is our biggest investor. Now, speaking about the let's say investment infrastructure and innovation ecosystem, I was happy to hear from your presentation that you are paying a lot of attention to ecosystem building and community building, because from our perspective, as in more from investor perspective, we believe that the successful and capable teams will find the financing sources like Horizon 2020 or business angels or venture capital funds, and we also help them to do so. But then they, of course, let's say, particular my answer is why we don't have many scale-ups here is because they move away to where the market is. And if we don't have let's say, attractive ecosystem here where we can give them more, just rather just the early stage financing, then they of course don't stay and they don't come back. We have a few very positive examples of coming back and staying here. For example, from Commercialization Reactor Fund, we had an exit of Nako Technologies, where they exited to German multi-billion company Schaeffler, and they established Schaeffler Baltics in Latvia afterwards, bringing the new materials or coatings R&D center to Latvia. This is a sort of future we are looking for. From the ecosystem perspective, I think that it has to be taken further rather than looking only, let's say, at startups or scale-ups or particular stage of companies. We believe that modern world is so integrated that we even need to look further than verticals. And by the way, we have an initiative on this supported by Ministry of Science and Education, and Ministry of Culture. I'm also co-founder of NGO, International School of Innovations, and what we try to do is put together a new ecosystem of STEAM education. STEAM education is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We see that this is a great example of how, yeah, STEAM. It's STEM with added A, combining arts, and this A leads towards adding to the necessary, let's say, combination of knowledge. It adds ability of critical thinking and ability of creativity. Art. It stands for art, and it adds creativity and critical thinking, and so the STEAM altogether leads towards ability of to be innovative and to be to create innovations, so what we try to do, we bring together not only edtech startups or STEAM educational institutions or artists, we bring together all the vertical and even wider with culture involved, with venture capital involved, with startups involved, and we realize that those parties usually don't meet because they are in different ecosystems. So this is kind of example that the new ecosystem should be much more integrated with other ecosystems again. Well, and also the approach of, in our commercialization reactor, the approach of science commercialization is that we put together scientific teams with wannabe startup entrepreneurs. So, because we think that scientists should remain at science where they are good at and continue over the development of their scientific achievement, and entrepreneurs should join them in the team and should be the ones that are working actually on commercialization and development of the company. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I think this issue of the ecosystem and how a funding and financing scheme at European level can only actually be relevant if it does indeed manages to stimulate the ecosystems, because otherwise, I mean, where are the companies going to come from? But Signe, please.
Okay, now it works. Now I think it's time to give the floor also to the audience. But before that, I just one aspect which Mr. Predikis raised, and I'd like to comment on that, because you said that it's why the companies are actually leaving Europe is not only the financing, but also the market. Well, they are moving where the market is. We know that on the one hand we have the European single market, which is one of our major competitive, also the sides, advantages. But on the other hand, we know that there are still quite a few barriers there. And actually, when it comes to new technologies, this is also something to be underlined. But what I also wanted to mention that one of the aims of the EIC board will be also to identify this kind of barriers. So it's not only the financing, but also the regulatory framework. And this is why what we are following now in the European legislation is the so-called innovation principle. That whenever we come up with new proposals in terms of the European legislation, we also need to keep in mind that they are innovation friendly, well, certainly they have to keep the safety, environmental aspects in mind, but they also should then create the possibilities for the innovators. Just to give an example, when it comes to self-driving cars, you can test them in some member states, but not in the others. So that in order to be able to scale up your innovative solutions, we also need to have regulatory framework which is favorable. And you are absolutely true. This is part of that. This was the comment.
Well, if I may just jump
Please.
in concerning the this internal market, it's at least promising that this existence of the barriers is recognized European-wide. And this is one of the topics in the formal Compet Council meeting, which is happening today in Brussels. So we clearly recognize that these issues do exist and that we need to address them. Of course, sometimes in entire European machinery it doesn't go as fast as we as a small country would love to. But at least the recognition is there. We had a good conversation back in Bucharest a few weeks ago during the informal council meeting. So I hope that Europe will address really reduction of these barriers in the internal market.
Just comment on the market. By the market, we should understand the global one. It's not only moving inside Europe. It's moving to US and moving also to China, and they, are very active in attracting technologies and startups as well.
Yes, we are aware of that fact, actually. That's one of the reasons of the EIC, in order to provide to European companies the option to stay in Europe if they want to. Of course, it's a free market. If other possibilities are better, of course, we cannot retain our companies, but it's important that they at least have the possibility to grow and develop in Europe. Maybe I can turn now to the public for questions, remarks, comments. Yes, I see one over there.
Hello, I'm Andre. I have to add for this market thing actually that basically the European market with 500 million inhabitants is quite nice. The biggest challenge, and Valdemars knows that as well, is actually the language barrier, because we have in Latvia like 1.7 million people speaking Latvian, and for sure if a company would like to sell more, they go to the US because simply English is there given for everybody. Everybody speaks English there, and that's one point from the sales point I see, which is a high barrier. But on the other side, it's like as we have in every country our specialities, also in the cultural needs. It gives us also in Europe the opportunities that our products or things we develop in Europe, that they are fitting even more specific target groups, and that gives us also potential which we could leverage also to other regions outside Europe, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's a particular challenge in the Baltic states, but it's a challenge common across Europe. Actually, I think it's more of a challenge for the larger European member states. If you look at France and Germany, I think the ability of people here to think and be able to function outside of their national language is definitely less so than when you have, I would say, a smaller country. But please.
Well, if I may comment on this, if we look in the future, we are developing already artificial intelligence. And the thing is that artificial intelligence, by definition, will have to be multilingual. So there's a better test bed to address this issue in the environment? Well, there are many small languages. And actually Latvia is doing quite good in that respect. So welcome. We'll help.
A bit of a joke, but also a serious comment on the other hand as well. We also recommend people not to learn English, Chinese, and other languages. We recommend to learn Watson language, which is the language that in the near future will be communicated between all the humans and AI-driven machines. This will be the global language which everyone will have to know.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I really believe that the artificial intelligence will help us to go through. And we have also a name for success. So that's company Tilde in Latvia. So yes, my name is Ellie Negle, and most of my time right now I'm dedicating to the military industries. And I was quite, how to say, surprised or influenced by the numbers of investment which Americans are having and what Europeans. And I was thinking all the time during your presentations what we could do different, because if we will do the same, we could not be more successful than they are right now. And also in defense sector, we are having a lot of cases when our Latvian companies have been noticed, even Anatomy Next, so which is not here today, but others. So we have to think differently probably. And I think it was really well noticed that companies are looking not only for finances, and I think in Latvia's case we have a very good example of cooperation with Altum, but we also are looking for basically for market. And in this case I'm thinking that opportunities which are in public sector are not really scaled up well enough, because I believe that procurement through the public sector can be really very good opportunity, especially for SMEs. And also in this case, I think it's very important to look more deeply on a regulation what we are having for innovative procurements, because we are not so, basically I think that only Latvian forests so far are being trying to implement this innovative procurement in Latvia. So for us, I think in defense sector, it's very good opportunity that we know our customer, that we cooperate with our customer, we understand the needs, the capabilities, what they need to develop, and I think that's very extraordinary opportunity for defense sector and dual use products. But thinking about other sectors, I really would encourage that we are thinking more about changes in procurement law. And still one more probably thing, if we talk about Latvia, then we know that there are too many initiatives right now in a legal basis where SMEs has been excluded for procurements. And this is quite painful for us. Putting different criteria for companies which should participate, what kind of things they should match, etc. So meaning these criteria. Yeah, thank you.
You're talking about Latvia or in general?
Latvia, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Please, Signe.
No, thanks. Just a couple of comments. First, you're right. Innovative procurement is clearly something which we could use much more, and we're actually looking into that as well. And how to do better than the US. Well, actually, one of the areas where we could do better is of making also our public sector more innovative. Because something which I've learned, for instance, from the successful startups, Estonian startups, by the way, who are in the Silicon Valley and who compare then the ecosystem of the Silicon Valley with what is around it. That is the public sector in the US, which is very much backward. So, well, certainly they compare with the e-government, everything that they've enjoyed in Estonia, and then to see what is there, which is actually, well, very bureaucratic, very time-consuming. But what we really, and this is something, this is not only for the Commission, but this is something what we can do together with our member states, is really to think how our public institutions also keep pace with all these technological changes, because, say, AI is clearly something which the public services could take into use. AI for not only for the innovative medicines, but also for the health systems. This is clearly something we need to look into more closely, and this is something which relates also with our missions approach. Because in the missions, it's not only research and innovation, but it's also the whole ecosystem which is supporting that. For instance, if we think about cancer mission, it's also the public health systems which need to support that. It's not enough only to have then the implementation of the research results. We also need to have that. So this is something I'd like to also leave with you, also to think more how Latvia and all the other member states could actually improve on that as well.
A couple of comments from my side. In terms of innovative procurement, I have to say we just need to be more daring, because technically the legislation is in place. It's just a matter really of identifying the particular places where to apply and start doing that. In terms of the developing the ecosystems, I think, and trying to be agile, that's really a headache of every government, I think, in the world. What we're trying to do, for example, in that biomedicine cluster, we did a hackathon. We are now brainstorming about the biobank law, how it will be practically implemented here, where we can apply the AI on the healthcare data. But then you end up in all those GDPR and data privacy and other issues which need to be tackled. But it's doable, yeah, because examples show we have our enterprise register using the chatbot based on the AI and talking to the people in different languages, actually. So it's really is doable. But there is clearly that challenge in the public procurement which was outlined, which is the willingness of public sector to rely on trusted service provider or product supplier versus risking with the startup companies. So, and that's I've seen in my own practice, also in the IT industry where I come from, that quite often the procurements are constructed to avoid the unnecessary risks. And there definitely we need to probably share some examples, share experiences, how we can help these SMEs participate better in the public procurement, because they definitely need the growth path. And providing the service to the public, to the government, would be one of the ways. So trying to kind of get over this pitfall would be somewhat a breakthrough in the public procurement.
This on? Okay, so I have two comments. One is that your mixing of the ecosystem members of business and education, I refer this as the triple helix. I don't know if you've heard that expression before. So I use that when I talk about the mixing of the different vertical areas with education and research and business. And so I completely embrace everything you just said. I love it. It's wonderful. So my question is referring to the selection rate success of the pilot of this program, because I was involved in an FET project in 2015. With such a low selection rate, it pushed me to my colleagues in Luxembourg with their agency that were inviting us to put our project through their environment. And it was so complicated and messy. After 2 years, we didn't succeed. It's a 3D metal printer, by the way. And we had to take a step back, and now we're looking at Europe again. And I'm curious about the selection rate of the pilot program.
Yes, the selection rate is very low. As we covered it here, it is one of the problems of the program that we manage right now. The type of changes we're introducing to deal with this is twofold, basically. We are trying to be more focused, first of all, on disruptive and breakthrough innovation, in order from the outset to have a higher, I would say, success rate, because the projects that will come in will be, I would say, more targeted on disruptive and breakthrough innovation. That's one aspect. It cannot entirely be successful here, because that depends very much on how the ecosystem, how the companies will perceive that, and probably there will be an adaptation time, and we will still have a number of companies coming in. Therefore, we don't necessarily will have an improvement at first. But the second important element here, and to address your question, I think it will probably be something you would appreciate, is that we're trying to have a much more agile way of managing the funding. In other words, instead of having a very bureaucratic way of following the projects purely from financial and budgetary management, with a kind of a tick boxing exercise at every step, at every milestone being fulfilled. What we'll be looking at is much more on the content of the project and see what the project is, how the project is actually developing. And when we see that the project is not developing maybe in the right direction, we will react much more quickly to indicate to the consortium pushing the project or managing the project that maybe there are a number of improvements that need to be entered into, allowing, for example, in certain cases, a reduction or a termination of certain activities, but on the other side, the ability for the project to be redefined in order to correspond to where the research actually is going, in order to, I would say, espouse much better the flow and the development of the project, and in that way to avoid situations in which, because I would say are the very straitjacket type of administrative management, we have just projects basically dropping out when they could potentially be useful if they would continue to develop in a different way. And on the other side, projects that potentially finish and use all the funding, but not with really an added value either for the project managers or for the project participants or for the European Union, because at the end of the day, it is a purely administrative fulfillment of the project without real, I would say, added value behind it. So we're trying to be much more agile. In a way, we're trying to bring basically the experience of the program managers that were done in DARPA and ARPA-E, for example, in the US, to this management, this project management. How far we'll be able to do that in the pilot, this is a test. We will recruit the first project manager, program managers in the coming months. We don't know who we'll get and how this can be really transposed fully in our funding environment is a big question mark, but this is definitely the direction we'll be trying to go.
Yeah, and I didn't introduce myself. My name is Amara Grops. I have a nonprofit, Baltics in Space. And so are social enterprises also allowed to submit to this program?
Yes, indeed.
Fantastic.
Other questions?
So my name is Edvards Filipovs. I represent the business union of Latvia. Just wanted to put the issue about the standards and the standard for SMEs and accessibility. It creates a cost to access new markets. And this regulation is also not very common among the Europe. If we talk about the single market issue, the standards and especially access to the standards for SMEs is very important. And I would recommend to Ministry of Economics to be more active in this field. Thank you.
I don't know if you want.
Well, just a short comment. Yeah, we are familiar with the issue, and yeah, we need to address probably better. The reality, unfortunately, is that when we are seeing the entire number of different standards which are at the moment applicable, it's really a huge number. Currently we're focusing a little bit more on the construction standards. They have a priority on our list, but we are trying to gradually work through all of this huge number of different documents. On the other hand, what I would say is definitely it would make sense to kind of speed up the standardization across the EU of all different areas which are still nationally driven by very many instances. So that's I think huge common task for the whole European Union to harmonize the standards well.
Indeed. Please.
Hello, my name is Natalia. I represent Deloitte, and my question would be: you are always talking about some gaps that ecosystems they somehow are not intersecting. But we, as a global firm, of course, we do work with governments. We do work for big corporations for innovation strategy consulting. So my question would be: do you see the added value of big consulting firms in the creation of ecosystems as you are discussing here? So yeah, this is my question.
wants to take that one?
Well, I'd say that it would be more a positioning issue for the big consulting companies for the markets. Because as the common practice, these companies are initially very small with very limited budgets. So on the other hand, if you are thinking from the development perspective that these guys sometime can grow into huge behemoths like, I don't know, Microsoft's, Apple's, and Facebook's of this world, then probably you should kind of invest your marketing bucks early in them. I know that companies like, for example, PwC, we were partnering with them in a hackathon in the blockchain technology. So they were ready to participate. They were issuing the consulting vouchers for the winners. So from my perspective, I definitely see that there is a space. The question is how you position yourselves in that space.
I can also comment on your question. I think that the role of big consulting companies, like every big four company as well, is a significant one. And I see that in practice. Starting from the work what you do with corporates in consulting, often that leads to identifying different, let's say, opportunities for bringing in innovations. And that access that Big Four or other big consulting companies have to the corporates and to their process is a unique one that almost no one else has in the economy, and that is a very good channel to communicate about pains, about opportunities and challenges in corporate management in their operations. And also sometimes big companies are innovation drivers. For example, as far as I can recall, EY were leaders in process robotization in a management in Latvia, and they brought that solution to Latvia and worked heavily on implementation. So that is the different angle as well.
Yeah, and I think we have a last question. No? So if not, thank you very much to our panelists and for having taken those challenging questions, and then we can move to the lunch. We will resume around 13:15, correct? Yes, thank you.